Okay, if everyone just get comfortable, I'll be back in a moment.
Can I ask a question?
What's on? Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Okay, this exciting week, if you haven't already downloaded it, so this is Prac 3, you can't consider the problem of defence without understanding the problem of attack. That's from Doug Tygar, Professor of Computer Science at UC Berkeley. So, by now, he says, laughing internally, but still, you've established this following vital information. You've got your business goals, your ability and desire to work with partners, the needs, you've got the legal and statutory frameworks, you understand what's regulating your organisation. You've got the information in your assets and you understand their intrinsic and extrinsic information. That means, if you've said you've got an ERP, for example, if you know that your organisation turns over $500 million a year, you know that your ERP must be worth at least 10 or 20% of that. So you've got some value. What happens if we lost our whole ERP? Well, it's 20% of 500 million. You can make an intrinsic value to it. Yeah? So some of your information assets, you can give them a value already. The reason for you doing your story in the first couple of weeks, how big are you, how many people are employed, how much did you make in profit, how much did you turn over, is so that you could use an actual figure to say this is the value of certain of our assets. You understand if you're doing R&D that your R&D must be worth, what, 30%, 40% of your business? Because no R&D, no business. So you can make value assessments. They don't have to be real. You can adjust them later. By the way, they do not all add up to 100%. So the value of each of your information assets added together can be more than the value of your company. And that's simply because an information asset, its value is its loss, not its purchase price. So if you lose all of your information assets, that could be a lot more than the total value of your company, because there can be penalties, there can be all sorts of other things. Extrinsic value just means it's something that we've assigned to it in the high, medium, low type category. It doesn't have necessarily a dollar value, but it's got an importance to the company because of something. So, now that you've got some idea of what impact the losses may incur, you should start to identify exactly how those losses can occur or may occur. You need to understand, or what you need to understand, are the vulnerabilities inherent in your organisation and any threats that might exploit those vulnerabilities. That's why you're building the risk statements. So tonight you review your business processes, because you all followed the path that I told you to do last week, and the information assets. What threats might impact upon the processes? How will the threats occur? Are you vulnerable? And if you're not, you can triage them. But triaging doesn't mean ignore them. Triaging means sit them in a corner and tell them to keep quiet, because either they'll get better or they'll die. But you keep remembering that they're in that corner. Gets dark, you might trip over them. If you are vulnerable, how often is the threat likely to occur? Can you develop a reasonable cost or loss model? In other words, can you do your AROs? Can you do your LAFEs and your SAFEs, which is answering an earlier question from Hamid, I think. Are the threats internal? Are they external? Do you have vulnerabilities that can't be exploited externally, but are easy to exploit internally? Is your staff, in particular, a threat? And going absolutely not, we trust them all, is a bit like me looking at you smiling and going, you know, I trust all of you that you will all do exactly the right thing in every exam and every quiz, and I wouldn't bother checking because I trust you all. I don't think you'll hear anyone at Macquarie University say that, but, you know, the words do exist. I can string them together. So consider the issues and add a list of tangible threats now to your spreadsheet or document or database or however you're doing it, relating the threats to specific vulnerabilities and then onto either a business process or an information asset. Don't forget to record the cost of losses against the threat vectors. Different threat vectors may result in a different type of loss. It's important to record them now, even though later you're just going to look at the largest one, or maybe add them together or take the biggest scenario. But if you don't have the information to begin with, you're going to be guessing. And that takes you back to week 1, bad management behaviour. Oh, we'll do it later. Management and student code for, oops, we forgot, we couldn't be bothered, we'll see if we can get away with never doing it again. Well, you have to. Don't forget to record the threats for which there are no vulnerabilities, because that might change. Yeah, it's great. You might all be using Linux backends, and you might all be using Mac desktops as front ends, and therefore you have no vulnerabilities to any Windows-based malware. But some brilliant person somewhere in a regional office might decide that a particular package that they're going to implement, which only runs on Windows, is too great to pass up, and it's going to be implemented, or someone inside the corporate area is going to do some shadow IT, which means they're going to use their own budget to buy their own boxes with their own applications that happen to run on Windows, plug them into the network, and suddenly you've got an exercisable vulnerability that then wipes out your whole network. So you don't ignore things, you record everything, but you make a note, doesn't apply at the moment. Because when you go through this process again, firstly it might apply, or secondly you might want to go, why did we say we could ignore this? So, are you clear for what you need to do by next week? Well, sorry, you need to have this done, I would suggest to you, by Sunday night. You know, you're not handing it in to me. I'm only giving you time frames for a successful unit experience of this unit. If, on the other hand, you really enjoy doing everything 30 seconds before it's due and not understanding whether the quality's there or not, you can do it as you choose. Everything that you do, your documents, your spreadsheets, the records of your discussion, all has to be emailed to me as stated in the week 1 presentation at the end of week 7. So if you don't have it in there, if I can't see everything that you've done and the justification for how you've arrived at your decisions and the processes that you undertook, you won't get marks for it. You have a maximum of 40 potential marks. If you've just got stuff but absolutely no supporting documentation that shows what you did, then you could be getting 15 out of 40. 15 simply because you've done it. But that's all. It is a hurdle. That means you need to get at least 20. You should be able to get 30 to 35 if you just do the work. Yeah, I don't expect it to be perfect and correct in all circumstances, because you guys, by the time you hand this in, it will be 7 weeks of seeing this for the first time ever. I'm not expecting you to be information security risk professionals, but I am expecting you to follow the process. That doesn't require any experience. So any questions about what needs to be done by next week? Helpful hint. You will find that the spreadsheets that I've supplied, or the spreadsheets that come out of that toolkit, are not suitable without modification for doing everything that you need to in this course. So at some point, you're going to have to start instead of blindly filling in the boxes, thinking about what you're doing. And part of it came last week where it gave you the options of looking at low, medium or high for things when the answer was actually yes or no. So, do apply your brain power. For those... Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry, in iLearn. Yeah. I've put up, and this has been, I put these up every year, these are just other things. So the stuff that's on, iLearn in the weekly area is there for interest and view and what have you. So the one that is actually important that I haven't described in detail, but I will put up now. The TRA template, you don't need to wait. TRA means threat risk assessment, and that's what you're using the 27001 toolkit to do. But I'll pop the other one up so you can see the difference between them. Okay, so this is the TRA template that I put up. This is a simplified version of what exists in the ISO 27001 toolkit. You can use either. Of course, talking all the time just really won't help because I'm not going to repeat it. There is a risk statement. The risk statement is, to a certain extent, an encapsulation of what your scenario is, what your risk scenario is. So, failure in the IT operational environment, that's an example. Inappropriate access to systems and data, that's an example of a risk statement. It doesn't say what information asset, it doesn't say what failed or how it was accessed or who accessed it, or, it's just a statement. The threats or the threat vectors are listed in column B, and you can use a standardized catalogue like the BSI catalogue that I mentioned, or you can do something else. You can record the information assets that are affected by the different threats or threat vectors. You can record if it's incidental or accidental. You can give the risk statement a number. It's just a number. You can decide if it's internal or external. You can decide if the threat impacts on confidentiality, integrity, or availability. You can describe the vulnerability. You can say, well, the consequence is we are going to lose this many days or have to put in this many days extra effort. It will cost this much, which you will have calculated by your AROs or LAFEs or SAFEs or whatever. It will have a political impact of high, medium, low, or what have you, which leaves us with an untreated risk rating of something. Once we apply controls, we ended up with this. It's different. Controls is later. This is a simplified all-in-one. You don't have to use this, or you can choose to use this instead of the 27001 toolkit. In either case, this is not comprehensive and it won't do everything you want. The 27001 toolkit, you will need to use a number of the spreadsheets. None of these are comprehensive. These are just to give you a head start. The second spreadsheet, however, is a little more important. I should have introduced this in detail, but as everyone's here, I'll do it now, providing I can find the screen. Okay, so you remember I said the problem with having high, medium, low, or categories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or incidental or negligible or stuff like this is that it is not particularly helpful. They're just, at best, ordinal information. It doesn't help you describe something. If, on the other hand, you decide to look at, your likelihood is easy, because your likelihood, you can work out an ARO or a LAIF or a SAFE or something. That's easy. It's quantifiable. But your consequences are harder if they're not financial. So there is a concept of what would management do? It's stolen from another popular phrase. What would management do means you determine what the consequence is based on management's reaction to that consequence. So let's say, for example, you had something that resulted in the consequence of a person doing the wrong thing and suddenly becoming dizzy. Now, as far as information security is concerned, well, that's nothing. That's not us. That's an HR issue. Well, on the left, the column describes what sort of impact area are we talking about. I've got a spider working its way up. What do you know? The left column, column A, is the area, the business area. So let's say health and safety. For an insignificant consequence for health and safety, there would be some sort of illness or first aid, or injury that didn't require any treatment at all. It was recorded, someone said they were feeling dizzy, but we didn't have to do anything else. That's what insignificant means for health and safety. For customer experience or operations reliability, insignificant means a short duration disruption affecting one part of the business. We're not able to work for 10 minutes. Everyone had to go out and get coffee. They came back 2 hours later. If you are in government or something similar, there's a negative article in a local paper, but no reaction. No one cares. That's an insignificant impact. A regulatory breach that is insignificant means some low-level non-compliance by an individual, but nothing happens. No penalties, no anything else you need to do. So you get the idea, those types of things. Major impact in the organisation. A major, in regulatory, for example, major breach resulting in enforcement action and a prohibition notice. Substantial fine, but no disruption to business. You'll notice that in here, there is nothing that talks about IT. Okay? Because we are talking about consequences to business processes. And IT owns practically no business process other than make sure that the computers are running and they're available and there's electricity and there's stuff. It's just the tool. Every other part of the business relies on it. So rather than building your table that says, catastrophic, which is which is a C1 in this case, instead of saying, well, that means it's 5 across by, or 6 across by 5 down, so it's got a value of 30, so that's catastrophic, that's meaningless. Instead, look at your impacts, look at your consequences, and go to this table and say, where does that particular consequence fit on this table? And that will tell you what it is. You'll notice that many of the calculations, when it comes down to here, budget, cost or revenue, I've left that blank. So the typical way that you would use that is for an insignificant budget consequence, it would be no money or time lost. Yeah, that's easy. That's a 0. For something that is here, which uses the word major, you could either say we lose this much money, or if you were more intelligent people operating the business, not having discussions on the side and not having any idea what I'm talking about, you would say, well, we would actually express this in terms of we would lose X% of turnover or X% of profit. And you would use that common indicator in all of your consequences. And you would figure out catastrophic. What would catastrophic be in percentage loss of turnover or profit? And you figure that out as a percentage. You say it's 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%. That becomes catastrophic. What becomes important but it won't kill us? Well, that might be 5%, 10%. Because it's a percentage value, you don't actually have to change this every 5 minutes. You can just relate it directly to your spreadsheet with your losses, and you can say, well, we figured out what the cost of our asset is, we know what our ARO or SLE or LAIF or SAFE is, and we can relate that directly to our profit and our turnover. We can now say, as a percentage, where does that fit? And that will automatically give us what our consequence is. It's relatable and it's quantifiable. You're not making this up. Okay, so guys, my hearing is short, but I can actually hear you. And if you're annoying me at the front, then you're annoying everyone else. Tell me about the relationship between what would management do and your calculation for consequences. What did I just say? In the last 10 minutes. And this is how you do really badly, because you make it up rather than listening to what I told you, and it'll be wrong. I'm not the one who's getting the marks. As strange as it may seem, you are. Or not. I'm sorry, I really don't feel that I need to be a primary school teacher, but I would expect that you've actually paid money for this course and that you potentially want to pass it. Or if not, you potentially want to get some information. And if you don't, then you can just give the university the money and they'll thank you greatly and you can not turn up, and that'll be also fine. But assuming it has some value, then perhaps participating is useful. If not, it will annoy everyone else around you. They might be polite and not want to say anything. Politeness is not one of my strong characteristics. If you use this consequence table and use percentages or use variables to express financial or day things that are quantifiable as losses, then you can automatically have your consequences linked to your threats and your risks, and you don't have to do all the calculations. It automatically populates them, and it will always be right. And even when, as a business, you change your mind about the consequences, and you can and you probably will, it will still automatically keep them all up to date and in step. Or you can choose to do it manually, and you can choose to use words that you can't explain, because the certifiers will say to you, you've said somewhere that this consequence is important. What does that mean? And you might fiddle around with words, but if you say, we've got a consequences table and important for, you might be the finance person. For finance, important means this. And then HR will say, well, for me, important means this. And and they'll get the idea. They will know that you know that that table exists and what it's for and how to use it. They'll be happy, and you will have actually learned something that's useful. Notice that the ISO 27001 kit doesn't do this. You have to do everything manually. Not a good way to do it. The other important concept that I mentioned earlier is what would management do? Again, it's rated A, B, C, D. You can go as far as you like. And what would management do is a description. This is part of your taxonomy. Is the risk that we have broadly intolerable? You know, that's your risk rating, not it's red or it's 30 or something, you know, neither of which have any meaning at all. Broadly intolerable is something that you have agreed on as a set of words, and broadly intolerable means that, just realised that should be CEO, not CDO. It means that this is management's response to something that is broadly intolerable. Most importantly, what would management do is the response, and the part of the response is how would management review that risk? How often? If it's a generally intolerable risk, management is going to review that, your choice, daily, hourly, monthly, weekly. Now, I would think that if you had something that was generally intolerable, that you can't accept, then you would review that weekly. Because your organisation this week has to decide what level of risk are you happy with? At what level of risk will you choose not to do anything? This is part of your starting the triage. If you have a risk that is tolerable, it's a medium risk. Look at the previous pane on the spreadsheet. If something is medium, does that mean that you think it is generally tolerable? These values, by the way, may not be right. You, as companies, have to decide that. You've got to decide where you want it to be. But if medium, according to the consequence table, it should be moderate. See, haven't used the same words. So if C4 is moderate, and you decide that a tolerable risk is a moderate risk, again, make sure the words match up. I've changed this and not done the right thing. What a surprise. I'm human. That's what happens. You might say if it's tolerable, it's a medium risk, and we will look at that type of risk every 2 months. Or maybe every 6 months, because it's a tolerable risk. If it's an intolerable risk, we might want to look at it much more often, because we're trying to reduce it. If it's generally or broadly intolerable, if it's undesirable, we'll do that. If it's intolerable, we might want to be on top of it all the time. The point is, you have to have your own decision. I've only given you 4 categories. I've given you generally intolerable, undesirable, tolerable, broadly acceptable. You might want to have another one. Don't know. Up to you. You might want to have a lot more. But you decide, you actually write as a statement around about this week, our organisation will accept any level of risk that is tolerable. That could mean all sorts of things, but that's your... I'm going to stand over here. It's coming with me. No, it's going back up. The good thing about things in Australia is that anything will try to kill you, and I'm not sure if that is I'll try to kill you, or if it's just a huntsman, but, you know, yeah. This is risk avoidance. You need to write down in words. Our organisation, the Fruity Tooty Bike Company, will accept any level of risk that is tolerable and will treat any level of risk that is undesirable with an aim to reduce all risks to tolerable. It's just a statement, but you're setting out in words what you want. If you can't decide that, you haven't done risk management. So by the end of this week, you need to have that statement somewhere. And you should be able to look at your risk scenarios with your threats and your vulnerabilities, look at something like the consequence table to relate financial and non-financial aspects, and be able to say, these are the risk ratings that we've now got based on our preferences, and the things that are tolerable we'll just put down the bottom of the list, and the things that are not tolerable we'll do something about, because you've triaged them. They are the something that if we don't do anything will die, but if we do something it will get better. That's how you use this table. Now, whether you choose to use the TRA, which that other spreadsheet, which can actually end up in some cases with about 130, 150 columns, it can be quite entertaining, or whether you choose to split it into multiple panes, or whether you choose to, it doesn't matter. It's a mechanism for recording and being able to understand, but that's only the recording. The other stuff you're doing, the working out, the notes you're keeping, the minutes of meetings, the whatever, that's the how we got there. So the certifiers are going to want to see all of that, and me too. So yeah, thank you for spotting that. Any questions? So yeah, download the what would management do and consequences table. It's very useful. In effect, any empty room. I think there are 2 rooms downstairs and 1 room upstairs, and I think next week we get every room downstairs, but I don't know. Okay, I'm just hoping, are any of these people here? Ali Akbar? Right. Aslam Mahmood? Okay, so you've all found your group, basically. That's the main thing. No, there should also be, okay, Andrew's there. Abdul Sheikh? Calling Abdul Sheikh? Once? Twice? Right. Harshdeep Sharma? Okay, I'll go to the other rooms and try and find those 2. Okay? So, there should be 6 of you. If, so who we've got? So we're missing Nisal as well. Right, so I've got to find Nisal, Abdul and Harshdeep. Good.
DGS. Okay, you've got 7 in your group. Yeah. And you need to take one extra person. Yes. I can give you 2 options. Yes. Synthesize. You again.
Did you get the mail?
Yes, and I actually got an email from them beforehand. So I've just sent something back saying, come here now.
You just tell me the location
I
where
don't-
are you?
Yeah.
Just mail them and just
Oh,
ask
that was
them.
DGS, wasn't it? Who did I say?
I'm just.
Yeah, you're in DGS.
No, I'm not in
No, which
DGS.
one are
I'm
you?
Silver Saves.
I was in the same.
Yeah. What did you have to find? The member that's sitting here.
How many of them you've got? Maybe your share yes. Not just the stocks and bonds. We're not talking about tangible assets, about information. Stocks and bonds as information are not information. Just like a computer system is not real information. Not like it.
Okay. So it's a question from us. So you talked about the transformation thing, information coming in and the transformation happening in the process and information going out. So the thing that would be is that, let's say the process is HR management. So is it something like information about our employees? It's coming in, and through the HR management process, let's say someone got an increment in their salary or a promotion, someone got terminated, something like this, or
yes, except that's a lot more detail. If you've got employee information going in, you've probably got employee information going out. So that's the level. But you might have employee information going in, you've got salary information going out. In other words, finance needs to know how much money is being spent.
So basically, so it should be finance instead of what you're trying to.
No, two different things. So, for example, HR would have a process called payroll. Payroll would have information coming in about employees, and it would send information out to sales saying, pay this amount of money. Sorry, to finance. Finance would have a process also probably called payroll, which says we get something in that says these are the people who've got to be paid, and then we send out information to every bank saying pay this amount of this account.
So basically this is information coming in, going through the HR, and then the information that is going out is going to be used by another person, something like that.
And sometimes it's not.
Sometimes not, but sometimes
yeah. But you need to work your way through that.
Okay. I was confused about this one. And about today, I'm a bit confused about books. I mean, we're getting a bit mixed up because most of the people, I mean, it's pretty very
yeah, should be.
I need a little help from you.
Yeah, but you all need to think about this, but you need to have spent 8 hours thinking about this. You try and do it in 2 hours, 3 hours, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You need to put it, that means people have got to come and do this outside of class time.
Yeah. Basically what we do is that we use these 2 hours and we meet on Thursdays, and I set some weekly tasks and goals. Now the problem is...
There is 6 weeks extra per person that needs to be done. Sorry, 6 hours per person that needs to be done. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing enough, and that's why you're confused.
Sometimes the problem that we face is that one person is missing. So that the information
that's okay, that
person,
means that that's missing and that person is falling behind, and when the assessment comes, they're being assessed as behind.
but the information that the person has, we also, the other departments also need
I understand.
So
they have to catch up, but at the same time, you get to assess that they've not done.
Yeah. Okay. And so from this week, I didn't have. I mean, if you can. Give
Okay,
me some.
no, you need to get last week's done first.
Last week is almost done. I mean, there are
The model
few
is
things.
left.
Yeah, almost done. So you should.
Hey, hang on, you'll have to wait for a second. Yep. Have you gone through the process using the diagram? From last week? Well, if you haven't done that, then you're a week behind, and if you don't do that, it won't work. So, get your group to go to last week's presentation.
আমার ল্যাপটপ নাম তো
Talks about how to apply information assets.
এটাকে ফাস্ট করে দাও।
Well, the diagram that said this is process information, transformation. That's what you need to do. Well, just pretend marketing agent. Just they sell something. If you go to sell something, what do you need to know? Look, no, you need to know who you're selling it to. You need to know what you're selling. Who are your customers? What are the numbers? Are they potential? Then you need to know what are you selling? How much is it? How much is it?
এটা দেখাবা
That's three business processes. And that's by not being able to find out what a market wants to do. No, it's just you know, what are you trying to do? If you're selling something, what do you do? It's like, I used this example earlier. You want to buy a bottle of milk at the shop. So what do you need to do? Bottle of milk. You need to know where the shop is. You need to know how much it costs so you can take money. So the business process of buying a bottle of milk, I need to know about the milk. I need to know how much it costs. And then I can go asking if it's how much this money can I buy. That's only the level that you need to do.
This is something.
Did I send you an email? No? They're not. Fine, okay.
So this is some of the tasks we've done last week. We have some more assets to add from last week's lab, and this is done by different people from different departments. I divided work between them, and they have done their
These are information assets. Can you go right up to the top? So, these information assets are too detailed. Too detailed. Remember I told you, you can consider all hardware, software and networks as one asset called infrastructure. Too much detail.
So the encryption, database access.
Well, look, if you want to have all of these, you can, but you're going to have to now do all of the assessments, all of the threat assessments, all of the risk assessments, all of the scenarios for all of those things.
Okay, but the question for this week is that how do I relate this with this? I mean, how do I?
Well, you record the information assets, which you've decided are all of these things. So go back to the other spreadsheet.
This one?
So information assets affected. But the first thing you're trying to do is you're trying to develop your risk scenario. You haven't done that yet. So if those are all of your information assets, you now need to develop your risk scenario that covers all of the potential risks, so about 10 or so scenarios. And that's where you all need to sit together. It's going to take 4 or 5 hours to do it.
And where do I document that scenario? I mean, is there any?
in words as a risk scenario.
Or just
It says
type in.
risk number one, the scenario where something, something, something happens that affects this type of thing, something, something, something. You do these words. Okay? Then, from those words, you put it into the spreadsheet saying, we've got risk statement, risk scenario number one, you give it an abbreviation, then you say what the various threats were, and there could be lots, which information assets were affected, and there could be lots. Was it intentional, accidental? What the risk number is? The threat vectors, were they internal or external? Did the threat impact on confidentiality, integrity? What was the loss? All
I
of
have
those.
a question. If there is a risk scenario in which the information process is not being affected, would that count?
No, we're only interested in information security. So if there's a risk scenario where an information asset isn't affected, then just stop thinking about that shit about something else. You're only
We
interested in
have to
scenarios.
create the scenarios with information assets.
Yes.
So there will be more columns added into this one. And about this, how do I use WWMD?
Well, no, you go back. So you're interested in the consequences. If you're in the lecture, well, actually, no, I did it here.
Yeah,
You're
it
in
did.
here.
Yeah, I did. Some of the information.
Well, it's also recorded. I can't go and do this 3 times each week. You've just got to listen and pay attention. Rather than using the little matrix 5 by 5 that says high, medium, low, extreme, colours, numbers, you can have that matrix, but you're not calculating the values in the matrix based on multiplying numbers together that shouldn't. You're saying we've decided that a major impact or a major consequence is something in this column. You've got to decide some other things. I haven't filled in anything to do with budget or IT. You need to put those in yourself. You need to decide what are the values that would give you insignificant, low, medium, high, extreme in those things. Once you've figured out what they would, if you know your profit, you know your turnover, and you know what they should be, you can make a guess at it, then you can determine whether the consequence of some type of threat executed against the vulnerability is low, medium, high, something based on something. And then later, when you say, well, what do we do? Are those risks tolerable or intolerable?
Yeah, it should be in the WWMD.
Then you say, well, we looked at that risk and we know the consequences, we know what the likelihood is, and we figured out the dollars and all that sort of stuff, and that leaves us with something that is undesirable. That means we need to do something about it, and how often we need to.
The frequency, yeah. I mean, how often should we review the...
Yes, I'm going to go through it again in detail next week. At the moment, get the stuff done that you haven't done.
Yep.
I don't know, what am I looking at?
Like injuries,
No, sorry, what is this?
the risk, because
Risks?
yeah.
No, they're just words.
We have to armor company.
No, but these are just words. So injuries, what does that mean? How?
Like insurance for
No,
inside and
how?
if someone gets insurance, like the company have to
How?
with that.
How? A risk statement. It's in the material. The risk statement says how something happens, why something happens, where something happens. The word injuries means nothing.
We need to expand
Risk scenarios. We need to do your risk scenarios. It's going to take you 6 to 8 hours. This is nothing.
We have to do this.
Yes.
But like integrity for integrity, if one of our managers sells our design to someone from the other company, is that is integrity a risk or not? If someone sells our design to
No, lack of integrity would be a risk.
okay,
But that don't fall into the trap. This is great for project risk going, oh, lack of integrity or something. That's not what information security risk is. Information security risk is you need to have a scenario. You need to be able to express in words, half a page, that when something happens to something in this way, these information assets will suffer damage of this variety that will cause this type of loss or something. It's in words. It ends up in the spreadsheet in different columns. It comes together, and you need to have that risk scenario clearly written and understood.
Okay.
But it's going to take 6 to 8 hours. You're not getting it done now.
We're just like talking in brief.
It's good, but is anyone here from...
Let's ask about this rate.
anyone here from Simba Saves? All right. Well, that's nice. Have you got all the diagrams behind them and all the work?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Remember, you get marks for this. I'm not going to look at it and go, yes, they're all right. Or no, these are wrong. This is what you get marks for. So you need to spend 6 to 8 hours every week yourselves going, have we done this together? Are you using the tools? If you are, then you're doing the right thing. Are you recording the information based on what you've got from the tools? Yes, then you're doing the right thing. How well are you doing it right? That's up to you to figure out. Otherwise, I can say, well, I'll tell you everything and I'll give you all 40 marks, or I'll tell you everything but you will get no marks because none of you have done the work.
Yeah. I
You
got
see
it.
the situation?
Yeah.
So I'm happy to help you to understand the tools that you need to use and how you need to use them, and keep going. Have you used the tools? But if you've used the tools and you've got things, you need to be satisfied that you've met the requirements. Have you used the tools? Are they information assets, not physical assets? We don't care about cars or building materials, or that's not information. Have you built risk scenarios? Have you done an assessment of your losses? You know about single loss events, annualised rates of occurrence, safe and late values. You know about all of that. It's all in there. It's not there for fun. It's there to be used. So if you know how much profit and turnover you make, because you should have by week 2, then you can make an assessment of what would be the cost of a loss based on safe, late and other things. So therefore you've already got your consequence values. And therefore you're working out the likelihoods. Well, that comes from those financial types of costs, which means you understand your risk, potential losses. Now build the scenarios for how that happens. But I can't go through every week everyone's work saying, oh yes, that's right, that's wrong, that's what you've got to show to me. Do you know what you're doing? At the moment, is it perfect? No. Will it get better if you keep using the tools? Yes. Yes. No, there are also individual marks based on peer assessment. And when you are examined by the external assessor, it's in week 1. It says how you get your marks. So you get a group mark and you get an individual mark based on your ability to answer questions that the assessors are going to ask you individually. And they're going to ask you about, explain to me how information assets are gathered. Explain to me the relationship between a threat and a vulnerability. Explain to me how management would react if something. And if you can't explain that, you don't get marks. Yes. Well, I mean, it's used for information processing. So if you need specialised hardware to manufacture something, no, that's not an information asset, that's a manufacturing. Don't care. Information assets are to do with information. So the fact that you need a special way to build a ball bearing is very nice, but it's not an information asset. However, because you're building a ball bearing out of some brilliantly exotic material that no one else has ever seen, and that comes from the R&D department, well, that's an information asset inside R&D. But the actual ball bearing, no.
So the specifics of that ball bearing would be an information asset.
No, not necessarily.
Like
Let's imagine you're building stainless steel buckets.
yeah.
40 million companies make stainless steel buckets. The fact that you've got a design for one, it's of no value. 40 million companies do.
No, but so you defined a scenario that that ball bearing is specifically to be used in some very high quality or high
If no
thing.
one else makes that ball bearing out of that material in that way, and it is unique to you, and if you didn't have it, you would go out of business because you couldn't manufacture it, then the design of that ball bearing is intellectual property and an information asset. The ball bearing itself,
It's
don't
not.
care.
The specifics and the design to it is an information, but that product itself, it's not a design.
We need to
No.
show this because
Yeah.
It's not 100% the same, and so
We'll say that.
I don't know,
Specific
but-
to this.
yes.
When you ask something, even if it's wrong, you know a guy. No.
at least we will so we should ask us for shipping company about now shipping routes and shipping ports planning plans diagram.
I said, how those assets may be used. So what happens if they conduct industrial espionage and steal your assets? So you're trying to identify with your information assets, what are the potential threats? Are they external to the company? No. If you think no one else can, if nothing you've got is of use or interest to anyone externally, then you may have no external threats. Yes, I'm saying capture major assets. Think about how they may be used by your competitors, because it could be that that's something you need to protect. You're trying to protect your competitive advantage. But if you don't need to, then you will. Yes, multiple choice. In week one, it's in the unit one, it's there in detail, it says multiple choice. From weeks 1 to 3 or 4, inclusive.
As a shipping company, as a shipping industry, the route plans and the shipping ports planning should be information.
Probably.
And internal and external networking, how the data flow goes from which port to which port, and collection points. There's a diagram and algorithm for the user control panel.
Is it somehow special and different? Are you doing something really special with BTP routing or something like that? Or are you just pushing it out on the internet and expecting the same?
It is our internal process, so it should not be similar to other. It might not be similar to others, but this is our way of making it. So, the network planning.
I wouldn't think so, but if you want to, you can. I mean, I'd be interested to see where you go with it. Now, the good thing about this course for me is I learn every year. You know, you might think that.
Well, we were actually thinking that we have a scenario that if we take up a different route, that will economically
but-
reduce our costs to operate, and then
Yes, but that's a cost of operation data. That's like aircraft that
Yes.
say we're going to fly
This
this
route,
route
yes.
at this altitude because we burn this amount of fuel,
Yes.
and now we're going to change it. But none of this is very little of this is secret because everyone flies the same routes and everyone's assigned an altitude, and you know it's not like it's intellectual property that is special.
but
And you know, if you lost that, guess what? The captain of the ship is going to make his or her own decisions on board the ship at the time,
Yes.
independent of whatever you design. But if the captain of the ship's got no idea where the next port is, that's a problem.
yeah.
Port plan could be.
But you know, there's a thing called a radio, So, look, I don't know. Why don't you try it and see what happens?
We're actually going a different path, like to economically maximize our profits. We're going all secretive about the routes.
There is no such thing as secret maritime routes, I can tell you that.
There are. Anyhow, I was thinking maybe we could, try the analogy of U.S. Navy that doesn't declare its routes where it's
Well, it
going.
doesn't have to. There's just about every country in the world has got ultra-low frequency ground terrain radar, like we've got called Jindavik, and it can spot anything 200 nautical miles out to sea, as long as it's at least half a metre above the ocean.
Yes.
Well, most US Navy ships stick up more than that. So, yeah.
Even for, I think, submarines, there's about a gradual limit of 400 feet.
Ultra-low frequency long wave transmission can identify
LiDAR.
submarines. Well, no, not LiDAR. LiDAR doesn't work in between isotherms.
Oh, yes,
So you need to have something that works independent of isotherms, and that's where ultra-low frequency radio signals do. Anyway, not what you'll do. Oh, same group. Excellent.
You have a question? Go ahead.
Information architecture and the intellectual asset could not be different. It should be information. How it is different. The information, not the actual item. So information will bring it the information. Like for this watch, watch is not the asset. Information.
27,000
What is
is an information
How it is important for you. And how you are working with it.
how it is important, it comes as the definition of how desirable, how moderate it is.
Or if your company is doing this management for lots of things, then you just
But the thing is, what we have versus the algorithms and all those three and others, that could be. We wanted to see how we are doing it. But it could be. If we can figure out that, way, then it will be. Yeah. He said that it is not secret, like the algorithm. If it is for our work, then
I
it
think
is
I know what you're talking about, but I'm not certain.
we could do something else.
You can't define any way algorithm. Algorithm should be there. Like you have to define an algorithm that should be there. Then you can't say that
We will create a diagram. We will create how the user will input that data.
company is using
As you say, you've got to get to basic shit.
We didn't.
And don't worry about making it look pretty until a long time from now.
My job is supposed to be that of the technical manager. From what I gather, the technical manager has to do with stuff like dealing with errors, fixing stuff.
Okay, that's good enough.
So let's say that there's a machine that's faulty.
Yes.
We're keeping logs of it.
Yes.
So that we can
That's an information asset.
so that we can do it better.
Yep.
So if
And blueprints of how that machine
that's
works
for R&D.
but that's still an information asset operationally, because R&D might have it, but you need to have it for repairs.
So logs could be an information asset
Absolutely.
as well as blueprints.
Yes, definitely.
But can we put blueprints for both the R&D and for technical management?
Of course.
Two different.
Yeah. Look, an information asset can be used in more than one area.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, it should. Definitely does.
But if we have two, wouldn't that be counted as one or two separate entities?
Ultimately, yes. But it's important to understand it's used in two different business processes. One is an output, one is an input. Different threats, different things. Well, I'll try. I have to look at this reviews.
Actually, we are having some confusion with information asset and they are all mentioned on the board. We just want to confirm that if they are correct, so then we can move.
No, bonds are not an information asset. They're a product. But that's too much. Oh, no, that's what is financial?
Details of the purchase.
That's an information asset.
Isn't that an HR issue?
Well, but payroll, no, see, it's an information asset used in two different places. HR has got a list of employees and what they should be paid. Payroll takes that information in as an input flow and then sends information out to every bank that says this person, this account, this money.
Right.
So oh, it's going to be quick because I've got to hear from you as well. What's the question? Yes.
Like we have a company.
It's written in the slides in week 3. It says what information assets are. It gives 2 pages of examples.
Yes, but we are confused. Like credentials could be information assets.
No, I've said you should consider all hardware, software, servers, networks as one information asset called infrastructure. Because if you try to do it all at that level of detail, you'll have 70 information assets.
And every role should have 2 or 3 information assets.
Yes.
And licenses and contracts could be an information asset in legal.
Yes,
like
definitely.
field.
Yes. Again, refer to the slides. It gives 2 pages of what information assets
Yeah, we
are.
have referred to it, but still we are having confusion because many of our group members are also confused, like if they are doing it in the correct way or not. So we have all mentioned on the board.
Did you work through the process for which there is a diagram?
Yes.
Well, if you did that, it should be simple.
Excuse me, sir. Just, I will take your 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's why
Yeah, no worries.
अगर कॉपी कर सकती है तो मतलब ये क्या हुआ पता है स्ट्रेट हो गया कि कोई कंपनी ने तुम्हारी इन्फॉर्मेशन कॉपी कर ली पेमेंट कैसे करोगे कॉपी कैसे की हो जाएगा मेजर हो जाएगा और अगर कॉपी कर ली है ठीक है तो अभी जो कर ली है उसके बाद क्या करें उसके बाद करेक्टिव मेजर हो जाएगा दोनों मेजर के अंदर तुम्हारा खर्चा क्या हो रहा है तुम्हारे कॉस्ट आगे का प्लान है ये सब सिनेरियो करेक्ट और स्पीड मिल रहा है अभी तो मेरा काम ये रहेगा मुझे उस मेरे अंदर आएगा R&D डिपार्टमेंट टेक्नोलॉजी यूज और
Yeah.